to Dr. Maskun, and also to all students here undergoing your postgraduate studies. Yeah, you're doing your probably your master's and or your PhD. Yeah, I wish you a good day. Yeah, I don't know whether you're experiencing the same thing that we're experiencing now in Malaysia. You know, it's been raining every single day. Perhaps it's due to climate change. I'm not sure. Now we're so into climate change, yeah, with the COP26 going on in Glasgow.
Yes.
So all these problems on environment, you know, at the regional level, at the national and also at the international level, global stage it's it's becoming a very serious attention. Yeah. Okay. So I understand that the your position right now is actually undergoing your thesis writing, dissertation or thesis writing. And some of you are new students, just at the inception stage, yeah. And some of you are also at the doing your writing in your second semester. So I'm sure that those who have actually gone through the second semester, you would already known how to carry out the your research, yeah. But at the same time, Dr. Maskun has requested me to speak on this again, to present to you some basic concepts, basic ideas before you actually carry out your writing, yeah. So it's very important that you need to first and foremost have an idea on how to go about conceptualizing your whole PhD thesis. Yeah, you may have an idea at the beginning of it all, but nanti throughout your process, throughout your experiences in writing a dissertation or thesis, you may have, you know, you may have some hitches here and there. You're not sure whether you're doing the right thing, you know, and then sometimes you may just having second guess, saying that, hey, am I doing the right thing? Am I going in the right direction? Is my approach all right? Is my, you know, am I looking for the right things? Am I looking at the right places for all the sources? And whether or not those sources or materials that you have received, you have obtained, are they relevant to your writing? So you do not want to go through writing for 2-3 years, and finally at the end of it all, you find out that what you have researched for the past 2 or 3 years, somehow, you know, they do not correlate or they do not contribute to your writing. So you do not want to have that. So first and foremost, you need to have some kind of an organization on how you're supposed to carry out your research. Okay, so I'll just share with you my slides. Can you see this? I think you can see this, yeah?
Yes. Okay.
Right? Okay. So I hope everybody just bear with me for an hour or so. I'm just going to go through, like I said, you know, some basic idea on how you're supposed to begin your research. Whatever your topic may be, whatever your area may be, it could be international law, it could be in human rights law, it could be environmental law, it could be anything to do with the areas of law. But the basic concepts in trying to come up with a dissertation or project paper or thesis, it has to come under these kind of concepts that I'm going to present to you today. So let's just begin with basic thing. So what is research? Now, I think you have to reflect on what you're doing in the first instance. You know, you are thinking, oh, I want to write something, you know, I'm required to write something in accordance with the policies of obtaining or graduating with a master's or with a PhD from Hasanuddin University. I need to write something. So what am I going to research on? So you need to understand what is actually research. Yeah. So basically it is these. They are all categorized into these 4 boxes. Basically, you can talk about a scientific search for knowledge. Basically, you're looking for knowledge. You're looking for new information. And at the end of it all, it answers your question. So basically, that is research. So in order for you to get from point A to point Z, you would have to go through a systematic search to get that information, to get that background on that particular issue that you have in mind. Now, that's what research is all about. And that search, conclusion from that search, you will somehow unravel the question that you are supposed to answer. Yeah, from the unknown to something which is known, and for law, it's something that you can apply. It's not only theoretical, but hopefully whatever that you have achieved and the conclusion of your research, it can be applied probably in your domestic context or international context or regional context or provinces in Indonesia, yeah, or in Makassar. So this is basically what you have in mind when you talk about research. Now let's move on to the research methodology. Now, once you have a topic in mind, an area that you wish to research on, let's say environmental law, because my area is in environmental law. So I talk a lot about everything under the sky, yeah. But now, like I mentioned, we are into climate change. And I'm sure in Indonesia as well, I'm not sure whether you have a representative. I'm sure you have a representation at COP26. Did your president go to Glasgow?
Yeah, exactly, Hanim. Yes.
Yeah.
The president and then the minister also.
Yeah, right.
And Sarip also.
Yeah. What? Sorry.
Sarip. Do you still remember?
He's there also. Sharif is also there.
Yeah.
Lucky him lah. Lucky. Good for him. You know, actually the academics should go there. You know, to give our input, yeah. But we're not invited. So anyway, so let's go back to research methodology. You have an idea of what you wish to research on, a topic, right? Now, how do you wish to go about it? Now, this is where the organization of your mind takes place. So in other words, you've got to be categorizing, or rather, you need to understand the background to your study. That's very important, because if you don't have any background to your study, you will not understand what the current issues are. And when you don't have your current issues, you cannot come up with a problem, because you do not know the issues. So you need to read a lot, read widely, not just on not on law, but you have to read on other things that's connected to the law. For example, in my research, environmental law, for example, climate change, I will not talk only on law on environmental management, but I have to look from different aspects: economics, transport sector, industries, taxes, right? So that means your reading will be broad in order for you to get to your statement of problem. So that's very important. Now, next thing you have to do is your type of research. What kind of research are you looking at? Are you looking at a legal doctrinal research, or a non-doctrinal research? So you have to look at that very carefully. We'll go through that, yeah, doctrinal and non-doctrinal. Secondly, obviously, you need to get your data, your material. Tidak ada material, tidak ada pembacaan yang luas, you will not be able to collect data. When you say collecting data, you collect as much as you can from different aspects, and you have to analyze. Bila pembacaan dibuat, you have to be analyzing the data that you have collected. I think you know this. Next thing, if you wish to do, is sampling and sample. That means when you talk about sampling and sample, you're taking an idea that you have concocted and you're trying to test it out. Okay, probably to a set of community to see whether it works, whether that kind of idea works or not. So you have to find out. In other words, when you talk about research methodology, it's a method, yeah. You've got to be organized. That's one thing I like to remind all my students. You've got to be organized in your thoughts. Now, research methodology, this is something which, I think everybody knows, is a way of doing something, and it's a science, it's an art of looking into a problem, finding ways and means on how to overcome those problems by looking at, you know, various materials, various sources and resources throughout your experience in writing your or preparing your dissertation. So basically, it is a science of studying how, basically, the ones that you see here, more or less, you know, an idea of how to get into this research process. I'm sure that many of you have done this, yeah? I think your first semester, you're still looking, you know, on how, because it's not easy to write, yeah? It's not easy to write, especially a thesis. So first and foremost, I'm sure that many of you have selected a research problem. Kan? Wan Dani dah selected a research problem ke belum? Have you selected a research problem in the area?
Yes, I have selected about medical because I'm a doctor, medical doctor. Yes.
I see. I see. That's good. So you've already come up with a problem?
Yes, about resident in Indonesia.
I see. Okay, good. That means you know what you're doing, yeah? You've already selected it and you know the research problem. I'm sure you've already got, you know, background, a lot of reading on this, and you've come up with that research problem. And the second bit, which is a formulation of hypothesis. Now, this is actually, Dr. Maskon, a lecture on its own. Hypothesis is something that you've come up with a statement, and then you're actually challenging the statement, right? And that would be inconsistent throughout, depending on how much you've read, how much you have come up with your research, and it can change. Your hypothesis can change throughout your how many years of writing. So it depends on how much you have invested in your reading, in your research, okay, and how much materials you have collected, and how much you have analyzed the materials, yeah, and that would depend on your collection of data. Now, the third part is actual attack on your problem. That means you're looking at it. Is it from a legal point of view? Now, in your context, obviously, yeah, but are you looking at it from a doctrinal or non-doctrinal? We shall go through that later on. And then once you have collected the data, yeah, you would have to analyze the data. Now, this is a difficult bit. This one will take a lot of your time because you have to tie down every single thing that you have read, right? And you have to come up with some kind of a conclusion from those data. And that data must be relevant to your research problem. So in other words, do not collect data that is not relevant. Okay, make sure you have your research problem number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, right? And your hypothesis, it must be very clear. The hypothesis can change, but research problem, you must make sure that it is very clear and that whatever that you've collected from your data will answer the questions of your research problem. There's no point collecting so many, and finally at the end of it all, you find, alamak, you know, this will not answer any of the questions, any of the research problems. So you have wasted your time. So do not do that. So you have to make sure that you're organized. That's important, yeah? The other one is after you have analyzed, obviously you have to write a research report. Now, what I normally suggest my students to do is once you have analyzed the data, come up with a short, what do you call that? Bulletproof points, you know, just to kind of, you know, tell yourself that these are the things that I found out from this, and this would answer one of the questions under the research problem. So that you have an idea, you know what you're getting yourself into, you know where you're at. If not, you'll be all muddled up, confused, but so banyak data that you cannot somehow, you know, synthesize it into one simple bulletproof point. So you've got to be very, very focused when you're doing your analysis of the materials that you've collected. Now, at the end of your research report, obviously it'll be like 60, 70 pages and so forth, probably more for PhD. Then you've got to come up with your conclusion, obviously. right? So you've got your problem, you've got your data, you've analyzed it, see which one would be relevant, which one would suit, which one would answer your research problem. Then you have to formulate your conclusion depending on the research problem itself, the objective of your thesis. And then obviously you have, and because of that formulation, you need to interpret and processing of data. So that is basically what you need to do. Now, when you talk about what you're doing right now, it's legal research methodology. You're doing something to do with law. Yeah, when you're doing a writing assignment on law, it can be a little bit tedious because you're looking at every single act, every single law, codes, whatever you have, enactments and so forth, and probably not just in your country, but also in other countries in the world. Okay, domestically, and also you'll be comparing regional, for example, EU, European Union directives as compared to ours, ASEAN, yeah, and all the other regional agreements and directives and codes and so forth. So you will have to understand that when you talk about legal research methodology, you will have to interpret or analyze those laws. Well, it would depend on the area. When Wandani says you're looking at medical law, probably you're looking into what are you looking into, Wandani, again? So that I can connect the dots.
About resident in Indonesia.
About the
resident in Indonesia. The doctor who get who study for the specialty. Maybe he wanna go to cardiologist or surgeon.
Yes.
The law. I wanna have a thesis about the residents, about the pay.
I see. Okay.
Yeah.
Right. I get what you mean. So in other words, when you talk about specialization, yeah, under medical law, you're talking about the accountability of doctors, of resident doctors, yeah? And you're looking at different laws. You're looking under criminal law, if they have done something wrong, let's say when they're operating something, they've done something wrong, what kind of accountability under the law that is imposed on those doctors. So you're looking at probably contract law. I don't know what you call contract law in Indonesia, law of contract. Law of tort, which is a common law rules, and the other one, it could be a criminal act, right? So you'll be looking at all these three kinds of areas when you talk about harm done to patients if those specialized doctors did not do what they're supposed to do during an operation. Tersilap, potong ke, that kind of thing, right? So, how do you impose damages on them, right? So in other words, you would have to see what is being done in Indonesia, what are the laws? Looking at those three cabang, three categories, criminal, tort, and contract, for example, yeah? So you have to look, analyze, and then after which you have to compare with other countries. How do they resolve this problem in other countries? Do we have enough laws in Indonesia in order to prevent all these things from happening? Or is the damages given to the patients sufficient? For example, I'm just saying, I don't know, that's your area. Yeah, I'm just giving an idea. So you have to figure that one out and to see if it is not enough, what happens right now? Right? Is justice given to those patients? The other thing is you have, when you talk about patients and doctors, there's always a limitation to damages because you cannot impose so much on the doctors without looking at the patient's attribution to that liability. Okay, so anyway, so this is part of what you need to do. So you're comparing your countries and Malaysia's laws when it comes to this type of problem. Yeah, and how does it affect the society at large? So you're talking about doctors and patients. Okay, so when you talk about legal sources, These are the things that you need to figure out. Materials, materials on medical law, for example. So you're looking from various sources. One is a primary authority of law, meaning you're looking at the law itself lah. Okay, I don't know what you have in Indonesia, yeah. And then you're looking at all those authorities like the judiciary, like the legislature, and you're looking more or less into cases, into statutes, regulations, codes, what have you. In Indonesia, when you talk about liability imposed on doctors. Okay, now for non-legal sources, usually people will just have surveys, you know, they have interviews, they have questionnaires. Those are more or less non-legal sources. So basically, when you talk about your area, Wandani, yeah, you're actually looking at both. You're looking at both. You're looking at the law itself, and you're also getting some information from non-legal sources like patients. Probably you want to interview them, for example, yeah, by coming up with an interview or questionnaire or a survey. Depends, right? To find out, you know, how, if they're put in this position whereby they have suffered harm or injury, will the hospital be liable? Will the doctors be liable for that kind of thing? Have they gone through such experiences? What kind of damages that were given to them? Whether, you know, they had to go to the courts to get damages and things like that. So that is non-legal sources. Yeah. So legal sources ni kita lihat pada hukum sahaja. Okay. Now, hang on, yeah. Legal methods. Okay. So the legal methods, there are a few whereby, you know, legal researchers like yourself will try to look into. Firstly, you need to study the system of values. This is what I mean by you have to talk about the society, the background of the study first. Okay, so this is in general, because if you don't understand this, the background to what you're studying, then you will not understand the rest. For example, when I place here, what is the objective of Environmental Protection and Management Act, right? So you need to understand how this came about. You have to know the development of sustainable environment in Indonesia. You have to know the economic planning from the inception of Indonesia, how it came about till now, that formed this particular law. So you have to know everything. Because if you're doing your PhD thesis, you are the expert. Nobody else will be the expert on that particular issue. Meaning, nanti Dr. Wandani, if you get your, inshallah, you will get your PhD, right? Then they will ask you from A to Z. So you would have to know. You would have to answer. You have to be prepared. Yeah, from beginning from A to Z on that particular issue that you are an expert in. This is very important. Yeah. The second one is to study the practice of law. So in other words, I mentioned just now, your PhD thesis or even your master's thesis, doesn't matter. It's very important that you have to put it into good use. There's no point writing a theory, la, 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 la. At the end of it all, there's no contribution to the society. Now, that's very important. I think that is the ultimate aim of any legal researcher. That, for example, you know, the country will take Dr. Maskun's idea from his PhD thesis, you know, on his area of law that he's in. So make it into a piece of law. So that is an honor. So if you can get that, have that in mind. Have that in mind. You know, something that you can contribute to the society. And at the end of it all, it has to be put into practical use. That means the lawyers are actually using your law. And see how it flows from there, how it evolves, because things may change. Yeah. Okay, next is to study the normative character. Now, basically, you're looking at jurisprudential part of it on what that particular law should do. Should it aim to penalize you for that? Should it aim to educate you? So what does it mean? And you look at this rule of compliance, meaning in all of the laws that we have, yeah, some, well, not some, all have this underlying current whereby compliance is important. You kena follow, you have to follow, right? In order for you to complete, you have to follow. Kena ikut, yeah. Next one is to look at the procedural validity. Yeah, when you have a particular set of law, now what is the procedure to implement that particular law? So that's important as well. And then again, to compare the international and municipal law, this is like what I said just now. You have to compare, yeah, between what's is expected of a country at the international level. For example, like what we're doing right now, UNFCCC, United Nations Framework on Climate Change, that is the standard or expectation at the global level, yeah, agreed by all countries. But when you go into each domestic country, like Indonesia or Malaysia, how do we conform or how do we adapt those international laws into our domestic law? So you have to compare and see whether or not we have achieved that at least a minimum expectation. Okay, so we have, hang on, sorry. The last one is on the legal impact analysis. Now, this is the beauty. When we have kind of a commission, yeah, when we are like for myself right now, Maskuna, I'm actually doing a climate change bill for Malaysia, regulatory framework for Malaysia right now for the ministry, for the government, and also I'm also helping with the water policy, national water policy. A bit busy lah, Dr. Maskun, what to do? Yeah, now everybody is so into environmental issues, huh? So so anyway, so when you talk about a legal impact analysis, not only you need to come up with the practicality or procedural value of that particular law, but you have to see whether or not it has any impact in terms of enforcement. In Malaysia, and I think many parts of the world, we have beautiful laws. We have law on this, law on that, law on this, law on that, but enforcement bit is rather weak. That means we don't enforce the law. So you have to look at that particular bit. Yeah. In other words, you need agencies or people to enforce the laws and to see the impact of that law, whether or not it resolves the issue. Okay. Now, what's the purpose of this legal research? Basically, you're looking at, again, jurisprudential approach. You want to control the society by imposing laws. You're looking at the welfare of certain parts of the communities. For example, you know, we have climate justice. Climate justice is basically trying to help those people that have been impacted the most by climate change. For example, indigenous peoples in Australia, or indigenous peoples in Canada, or even, you know, those people in low-lying islands, for example, Marshall Islands, Fiji, yeah, which they have been impacted by a lot of this climate change, the rise of the water level, the sea level, and because of that, they have been, you know, they have been somehow marginalized. So how do we help them? Next one is, why do we have this legal research? Is also to look at law reforms. If it's not good enough, Wandani, yeah, what you have now when it comes to trying to make sure that the doctors are liable for their actions, if it's not good enough then, now, so you've got to create a better tool, a better law, in order to make sure that it does not happen. But if it happens, you'll be imposing a greater amount of accountability and responsibility on the doctors. Okay, so this part of this are the reasons of why we have legal research. Next would be to know the law, obviously, and to know the evolution of law, meaning from beginning to the end, you know, what has happened. Comparative law, you're trying to compare laws, and then you're trying to figure out the workings of the law. How is it being worked? What are the agencies that implement those laws? Whether they have a task force, a commission, right? What are the departments that manages this implementation, enforcement of the law? And finally, if there are any problems, Rising from that working of the law, then you would have to go to the courts lah, ke mahkamah, yeah, to see whether or not a certain judgment can be made on that particular issue based on the law that they have applied. Okay, so this is basically there's so many reasons as to why you want to go through, carry out a legal research. Okay, so types of research: documentary research and field research. I think in most cases right now for law, we are doing both. Documentary, desktop research, because we cannot go anywhere right now. Yeah, last time we used to be here and there all over the place, but more so now we're doing more of documentary research, meaning desktop research. We're looking at cases, we're looking at legislations, we're looking at government portals, websites, and so forth. Field research, as you know, you go out beyond your room and start interviewing and conducting questionnaires, surveys, and so forth. So you're going out. More so now, I think, for legal researchers. Now, documentary research, what I mentioned just now, yes, doctrinal legal research. It will comprise of this doctrinal legal research, meaning you're looking at the law itself. How the law operates. How does it work? Okay, and you would have to review materials, primary sources, secondary sources, in order for you to know, like I said just now, one of the why you want to come up with, why you want to do legal research, the evolution of the law. From beginning A to Z, apa yang telah terjadi, ya, sehingga this Environmental Management Act telah dilaksanakan di Makassar or di Indonesia. So you have to know from A to Z. And then obviously you're looking into statutes, precedents, publications, cases, and whatnot. Yeah. So this is what documentary research is all about. You actually is a desktop reading all the time reading. Field research. Now, field research is a combination of these four circles. Yeah. Doctrinal, that means you're looking at the law. Qualitative or quantitative, either you're doing a sample survey, or you're getting interview conclusions from interview surveys and so forth. Statistical, normally I don't do this because it's more for the sciences and for for the business school, economics and all that. I stay away from this because I'm not an expert. I don't want to do this. It's difficult. Yeah. And also empirical is basically a lot to do with sciences. So normally for law, we normally go via doctrinal or qualitative or quantitative. That will be safe. Yeah. So the research categories that we have right now, I think when you look at this, you will figure out at the end of the day, it's purely for education purposes. Yeah. Because it would add on to the body of knowledge, the body of law. So basically you're actually contributing. So it could be a fundamental research. Basically you're trying to find out, is this the truth? Is this really right? Is this correct? Yeah. So in legal field, it is used to verify the old established principles and law, meaning you have an old law. You are trying to say that this one still works. This particular law still works right up from then until today. It is relevant, basically. Now, for your applied research, is more of trying to resolve certain issues. For example, let's say Wandani, applied research. If a practical problem such as how do you, the question is how. When you want to come up with a solution, it's always the word how. How do you resolve this issue on liability? Liability imposed on doctors, which is very low right now. How do you increase it? Okay, so you have to come up with a how. How? Yeah, basically it's a more of a application. Yeah, when you talk applied, it's application. Yeah. Action research is when you are trying to diagnose, it says here, diagnose a problem, collecting, proving or disproving hypothesis, This one, basically, you have to go out. You're talking about enforcement, for example. Yeah, you have to work with those enforcement agencies or enforcement officers to find out whether what they're doing in order to implement those laws works or not. So you're going out there. It's an action research. Okay. The one that we're looking into is probably this one. Yeah, item D, doctrinal or traditional or non-empirical legal research. This is what we normally do lah. For law students, for law researchers. Yeah. You're looking at the substantive areas of law. In your case, Wandani, you're looking at medical law. You're looking at probably constitutional law. Yeah, you're looking at criminal law, torts, contract. Yeah, duty, liability, accountability, responsibility, damages. Yeah, all those things. Yeah, when you talk about medical liability imposed on doctors. So this is what is known as pure legal research. You're looking into the law itself. Is it good? Is it enough? Is it sufficient? If it's not enough, how are we going to go about this? That kind of a thing. Yeah. So doctrinal research means, like I said, doesn't matter whatever subject area that you're doing right now, my dear students, you have to read, 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 and read. Baca, 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 baca. So bila you tidur pun, you rasa macam you baca juga. That's what it is when you're conducting your legal research. Right? You cannot sleep because you'll be thinking all those words. You know, when I did my PhD, I couldn't sleep because I could, in my sleep, I could see the words, you know. So it's not really a good sleep, but at the end of it all, when you wake up the next morning, you somehow have this a different perspective on things. Somehow you work during your sleep. I do not know. Yeah, probably many of you have this. Probably many of you have not. But anyway, it depends on the individual. So doctrinal research, you have to read. And when I say read, and when I say analyze the materials, not only on law, you must read around the subject. Okay, macam Wandani, when you're talking about medical law, you're talking about the responsibilities of a doctor under the Hippocrates, what do you call that? You see Hippocrates, Mas Kun, the what do you call it, the promise made, yeah, by any doctors. Yeah, so you have to read around it, not just on the law. You have to read on what is expected as a doctor in their field. Yeah, and then you have to come up with a conclusion to your research problem and write up your study results. So basically, this is what doctrinal research is all about. Now, sources of doctrinal research, when I say doctrinal research, is basically desktop study. You're reading. So you're looking at all of these three categories. If you're not doing any of these three categories, that means you're not doing doctrinal research. So it's purely law, purely legal. Yeah. So you're going into all this textbooks, statutes, your websites, your government web portals, commentaries, case decisions, and all that. Yeah. Now, characteristics of doctrinal research. This study is mainly based on legal propositions. Basically, that's what you're doing. You're trying to figure out whether the law is sufficient. Is it still relevant? You know, do we need to change it in accordance with the evolution of time? You know, what does it say? Does it still affect us now in the way that it affected those people then when it was enacted, you know, many years ago? So it depends. So it has a lot to do with the impact of that particular law. Okay. Now, empirical or non-doctrinal legal research. The one that I mentioned just now is doctrinal research. Purely you're reading the law. Reading. So when you talk about non-doctrinal research, you also talk about social legal research. And I think in this aspect, the legal researchers are, I don't know, is slowly getting into this particular kind of research whereby, you know, we normally have this interdisciplinary research, law with medical health, law with the Environment Institute, law with the economics, law with business, you know, law with anything, right? Because every aspect of our lives whether we like it or not, law plays some kind of a small portion or a big portion. Yeah. So it is interdisciplinary. It can be interdependent. Yeah. So right now, I think, Dr. Maskon, we are doing our social legal research in plastic pollution. So we're not looking into the law in itself. We're looking at how the law has impacted the society. So, and this is what I think we're moving into, yeah, for law researchers. And Wandani, when you're talking about your medical, you're looking at liability on resident doctors, I think you have to move a little bit into the social impact of the law. You have to talk to the community. You have to talk to the society. You have to talk to patients. You have to talk to the nurses. You have to talk to the doctors. So you're not looking at law per se, you're also looking at social impact of the law. Okay. Now, characteristics of empirical or non-doctrinal research. That means you're going out of your room. If it's doctrinal research, you're always in a room looking at the four walls, and that's all that you see. And your PC and your books everywhere. But when it comes to non-doctrinal research, you're moving out from your room. Yeah. So it is trying to look at or even fulfill all these characteristics if you can. Right? Like number 3, it tries to find out the effect of each decision on people and society as such. Now, in your case, Wandani, when it says trying to find out the effect of each decision, meaning effect of the law, what you have right now, right, in terms of damages given by the courts on people or victims of wrongdoings by the doctors, for example. So you have to go out, see whether or not it's enough. Is it enough? If I were to give you 10,000 USD, the judge has already decided to give you 10,000 USD. Is it enough? Is the law sufficient to give you up to that amount, or should it be more than that or less than that? So it depends, yeah, on how you come up with this idea of your research. So all of these characteristics you may find, if you're doing a social legal research, you may find that it exists throughout your experience. Okay, hypothesis is very important. This is the one that I mentioned earlier, whether you are disputing the hypothesis or you're agreeing with the hypothesis, and this may change throughout your dissertation. Yeah, so the formulation of hypothesis could be CCA will bring positive change in Indonesia's environment, for example. Right? So you have to prove this. It could be proving this, you could be proving this, or you could disprove this. Okay, you can agree to this or you may not agree with this. If, let's say, a climate change act were to be enacted in Indonesia. So your methodology could be in the form of empirical deductive method. You can use questionnaire, and then you can have schedules for uneducated people. Probably you go there for interview, yeah. Selection of sample, what kind of sampling technique that you're going to carry out, your sources of data, secondary and primary sources that you can look at, your data collection. This is where you have, come up with all your, carried out all your collection of data, and analyze it, interpret the data that you found, and you have to verify the findings and come up with a conclusion, conceptualize whether or not the Climate Change Act can be proposed in order to overcome issues of climate change in Indonesia. Okay, of non-doctrinal research, you can come up with all this, yeah, questionnaires, interview, observation, focus group discussion. Now, let's say if you wish to come up with a piece of law. Now, that piece of law will affect many, many, many sectors. Yeah, when you talk about climate change law, you'll be talking about energy sector. You'll be talking about coal, the industries, yeah. We're talking about the community which have been marginalized by climate change. You'll be talking to people in the transport sector, because when you talk about climate change, you're trying to reduce carbon dioxide emissions from various sources. So let's say if you wish to do focus group discussion, you would need to call people from the government. You will need to call people from the NGO. You will need to call people from the energy sector, for example. So you ask them certain questions, then they will come back, hopefully with some kind of a feedback. And that's very important for you to carry out in order to verify whether or not you're going on the correct direction in order to resolve this problem. Yeah, and whether or not at the end of the day, Climate Change Act is suitable for Indonesia or not. So you have all this type of approaches. Yeah. So distinction between doctrinal and non-doctrinal research. If you were to see doctrinal research, I mentioned earlier, you'll be talking about more on the law itself. When you talk about non-doctrinal, that means you go beyond the law. You go beyond the law, yeah? So these are the distinction, the differences between doctrinal and non-doctrinal. I think, Maskun, your students can look into this themselves to see the distinction between these two kinds of research, yeah?
Okay.
Okay, now we look into another category, which is the qualitative versus quantitative. Now, when you talk about qualitative, that means you're trying to look into, again, a desktop research, yeah? A desktop research, and then you're looking into interviews and observations, what's written. But when you talk about quantitative research, quantitative, and that has a lot to do with maths, mathematical data, yeah? Where you can actually transform it into statistics now. This will be useful when you wish to get some kind of an, for example, how many people in the community use plastic at home, for example. Yeah, so you can quantify that. Boleh buat perkiraan, ya. Kemudiannya, you can use that data and transform that into, a conclusion. So it depends. You can use surveys. Selalunya orang buat survey lah. Google Form survey itu ada kan. You can use that kan. And there's so many other traditional kinds of surveys that you can conduct lah. Yeah. But more often now, because we're doing everything online, more people are actually assessing the use of Google Form, which you can find in your Gmail, your Google, indicators. Yeah. Okay. So these are the differences between quantitative and qualitative. You can read this on your own, but basically when you talk about quantitative, you're talking about numbers. When you talk about qualitative, you're only talking about pictures, words, things, objects. So these are the two basic distinctions between quantitative and qualitative. Yeah, okay. So I think you can read this on your own. And for quantitative, usually we use survey. Because in order to get that data in numbers, we use survey. Yeah, percentages, pie charts, and all that. Yeah? It can be transformed into that. Okay, now this is one of the things that you need to figure out when you're writing a thesis. How do you make relevant reasoning? How do you make sufficient reasoning? Yeah. When you're trying to come up with a conclusion. This is very useful when you're doing your hypothesis. So there are two methods. One is the deductive method, and the other one is inductive method. So basically, this is what it is here. This is deductive is going down from general to narrow it down. Inductive is actually from narrowing things and you're putting it into a more general perspective. So let's just see what it all means. Yeah. So deductive argument means, if you were to look at the example, there's a simple example. All flowers have fragrance, meaning it's very general. Yeah, it's very general. And then you are transposing it into something which is more narrow. Daripada yang besar, kita turunkan kepada yang paling kecil. This is what you call deductive method. For example, all flowers have fragrance. So rose is a flower, therefore rose has fragrance. That means you're generalizing it at first, and then you are narrowing it down to a conclusion on a certain particular subject matter, right? Now, as opposed to inductive method is terbalik ya, terbalik ya. Tadi general to narrow. Sekarang ini inductive is narrow ke more general. So man A died, man B died, and so on. So all men are considered mortal. So you will see that kind of reasoning nanti ya. Whether you prefer the inductive, yeah, atau you prefer the deductive. General to narrow or narrow to general, depending on the scope of your study. It depends. So this is again the distinction between the two methods. The two methods are as such, yeah. I think you can read this on your own. I think it's very, very clear already. For inductive is bottom up. Bottom up means narrow to narrowing a particular area. Okay, this is important, I think. I think for those of you who are about to write or think, you know, or still menghadapi kesusahan ya, kesukaran untuk menuliskan, writing a research proposal is, even for me, it's completely different. Difficult, not different, difficult, yeah? Because you have to come up, you have to read a lot. Then you have to figure out, you know, from all those data that and all those things that you've read, you've got to find a problem. This is a difficult part. So at the end of the day, once you have read everything under the sky on that particular area, and it has to be a narrowed down area. Let's say for environmental law, when you talk about environmental law, it's so wide. So you have to narrow it down now. That's the method, whether it's inductive or deductive, yeah? From general to narrowing it down to a particular area of environmental law. Let's say you're looking at water pollution, okay? Water pollution is very wide, yeah? First is environment issue, and then you're looking at water pollution. Okay, water pollution, what do you mean by water pollution? Is it in the rivers, or is it in the marine areas, or is it in the lakes, or is it in the drains? What do you mean by it? So you've got to narrow it down. Once you have narrowed it down, you've got to figure out what is the problem here with the rivers. Dirty rivers. Why is the river so dirty? Why? So you have to read around the subject and to figure out that particular problem. Why? Is it because of the law? Is it because you have to review is obviously you would have read a lot earlier, yeah, meaning you dah baca bahan-bahan, primary resources, secondary resources. Then only after getting all those, you can draft a proposal, which you have to hand it to your supervisor and to your lecturers, yeah. Now, when you talk about sources of research data, yeah, that would be, this one is steps to writing a research proposal. But before you write, you need to collect the data. So this is where your research problem and your literature review, very, very, very important. They are tied together, yeah? That means you have to do a lot of your collection of data. Collection of data from all these sources, yeah? All these sources. You have to identify the legal issues, you have to analyze the issues. Probably you might have to look into legal dictionaries because probably there are some words, they are in Latin, or they're in French, they are in Dutch, yeah? In Indonesia, probably they are in Dutch, that you have to translate it to Indonesian language. Probably the legal dictionary will be useful for you. And then you would talk about, you look into journal articles, you have to look into legislations. And this is the thing that you need to do. Synthesize everything, look into it, read into it, come up with a critical analytical conclusion, and then you'll be able to come up with at least your research problem. Okay. Now, types of data research, primary data and secondary data. This is the one that I mentioned to you earlier. It's again, primary sources, secondary sources, yeah. Primary data is something which you have collected specifically for your research work. And this one is something that you do on your own. It is an original work. It is not something you cut, copy, paste from Google. It is not that. You have to do it on your own. You have to come up with your own questions. For example, in your interviews or surveys, you have to come up with your own questions in your surveys. And from that feedback, your survey feedback, that you have to analyze and you come up with a conclusion. And that is known as your primary data, original work. This is not something done by, for example, Dr. Maskun has done this, and I use Dr. Maskun's data. That is not considered as primary data. That is considered as secondary data. Okay, so basically that is the idea of this primary data, secondary data. Now, it will be the advantages of primary data. Yeah, if you do it correctly, then it will give you a very, how do you say this? An accurate conclusion, depending on the problem research and also your objective. It has to be relevant. It has to correlate. If you come up with one area of study, make sure that the questions that you come up during your survey, it is completely, hopefully that it will answer your problems. Yeah. That means you've got to be very focused in this sense. Now, disadvantages of primary data, if you wish not to do in this way, then, these are the problems lah. Yeah. When it comes to carrying out such collection of primary data. So look at number 4. Sometimes the respondent may give fake answers. Kita nak cepat, ya. Sometimes survey says, oh, you can complete it within 15 minutes. We don't have 15 minutes. So sometimes you just go through and just say yes, 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 without actually considering the correct answer that you wish to put. So it could be something which is not accurate. Yeah. Advantages of secondary data, it is obviously cheaper as compared to the primary data, because primary data is a lot of effort. Yeah. You have to come up with your own questions. You have to go out there. You probably need to spend money, right? You have to meet people, and then it takes a lot of time. Now, secondary data, for example, the one that I mentioned to you just now, I take it from Dr. Maskun's research. And I know that Dr. Maskun's research is reliable, accurate, and I take it and I use it for my study. That's okay. Because you don't need to spend money. If you don't have much time, let's say you have only 4 months to come up with a project, a research project, a thesis, or a dissertation, you can't do it if you were to do this primary data. So you've got to look at your time as well. Yeah, if your time gives you, you probably have 3-4 months to come up with a dissertation. That's not possible for you to do the primary data. So it's better, it's easier for you to resort to secondary data. Okay, so this will be the disadvantage of secondary. It could be obsolete. Yeah, look at number 3. The data can become very old. It could have been done in 2000, but yet 20 years later you're using it now, so probably it is obsolete. Yeah. Right, now we move on, collection of data. I think this one you can read on your own on how you wish to collect data. But if you don't organize it well, you may just receive inaccurate data, and you cannot validate your study. So that's going to be a bit of a problem. So before you conduct any kind of data collection, make sure that you focus on what you wish to do, how you wish to carry out, and the questions must be on spot. Yeah. Now, sources of collection of data, I think you know this. You can take from the judiciary. Yeah, you can take judiciary, the legislation itself, the executive, the primary field sources, like I've mentioned earlier, questionnaire, interview, and observation. So you can read this on your own. Basically, areas of the law that you can dip your hand into in trying to get your information. So these are the sources, yeah, your resources. Okay, so when you talk about methods or tools or sources of how you wish to collect your data, there are many. So you can either use questionnaire, you can observe through observation, yeah. You can interview your respondents. You can even nowadays telephone, or you can use fax or email, and you can do a schedule depending on the context of your study. And obviously right now, most of us will use survey and case study method because we're doing it online anyway. Observation is rather, we don't do that lah, Dr. Masko, now, observation kan. We hardly do this, but questionnaires, interviews by telephone, email, and survey, I think those are the common methods that we normally carry out. Now, questionnaires, I think you know, yeah. I will not go through this one by one, but make sure that you come up with relevant questions to your research problem. So you've got to think, because you don't want to do work twice or 3 times. So before you even come up with the questions, read around the subject, read around your research area, and then come up with relevant, accurate questions that can actually, at the end of the day, will answer your problem statement. So questionnaire, this one I think you can read on your own, yeah. Interview, I think, I do not know how many of you like to do this, yeah. Some PhD candidates, they will actually meet key personnel from ministries, from task force, from the police, or depending on the area of your research, yeah. So it would be good if you can meet face-to-face, record it. Telephone interview usually is not so accurate, it's quite difficult. If you have like this, if you have like an online Zoom kind of an interview, it'll be good because you can record it. And you can actually revert, and take a look at the recording after the actual interview. Okay, observation is normally done during like, if you have a therapy, right? This is mainly for social research. For legal research, we hardly do this, yeah? But you can read this on your own, on how to observe, in order for you to collect data. Telephone, mobile, fax, and mail, I think you know this, yeah. Collecting feedbacks, this is again by post or by mail, but nowadays, as we know, make sure that, the email addresses are accurate. Yeah? Sometimes, and Dr. Maskon, we have a bit of a problem. They give us fake mails, email addresses, and we never get back the, the correct amount of respondents. So that is going to be a real problem as well. Then we've got to do it all over again, probably get more respondents. And then case study method, this one is actually looking at your, the issues that are plaguing, in certain communities. Usually, I don't know, I don't know in Indonesia, but what we have here is we always link community-driven research. Yeah. Let's say, for example, the energy, the company would like to come up with a new grid, yeah, electrical grid at a certain areas, rural areas. And then normally what we do is, for the law people themselves, we actually venture out. We do field research. We go and ask the communities that are impacted by that kind of, development, even though we know that it is not really legal per se, but we just, we normally ask them how they feel about the whole development and whether or not we can solve those problems looking at the law, what the law can afford to give them. So that case study. Now, survey method, like I mentioned before, I think you can read this on your own. Yeah. Secondary sources of data collection, you're only looking at secondary authorities or comments or in books, in reviews, in journals, reports, encyclopedia, and whatnot. So basically, these are not from the primary sources, the main or the main sources that produce the laws, but these are those others that repeat the laws that have been, enacted by the primary resources authorities. Okay, so I think this could be my last slide, Dr. Maskun and students. Yeah, example of a basic research content. This is more or less like a proposal as well. Yeah, but this is usually in UKM. What we do is we have, after the second semester, we'll ask the students to come and speak, to present basically on their research content after 2 semesters. That's what we do. We have like a forum or a seminar, and they will have to present that. So and we have assessors to sit and listen and to comment. At least the students would know during the second semester whether they're on the right track or otherwise. So this is basically a basic research content that we require from students. Yeah. Literature review, whether they've done enough reading, research and findings from this literature review, analysis of finding, recommendations, looking at, problem statements and so forth. And hypothesis, like I said, hypothesis is very important, because during your viva voce, yeah, where you defend your thesis, sometimes the examiners will just ask you, what is your hypothesis? Whether or not your hypothesis, after looking, reading, writing your thesis, your completed thesis, whether that statement is true or that statement is untrue, or whether that has changed, and how has it changed, because of what and why. So it's very important that hypothesis is to be placed at the top of your head every time you meet your assessor. And it must be done in a one line. It shouldn't be done in a paragraph. It's only a one-liner, only one statement. And if you do that, that means you know what you're writing. Yeah. Okay, that's all, Dr. Maskun. Thank you very much, students. I hope I did not bore you for the last an hour and, well, nearly an hour and a half. I hope that you've received, some kind of a little knowledge on the basic, on how to handle your research writing. So thank you very much, Dr. Maskun.
Okay, thank you so much, Hanim, for providing us a great lectures for this morning, actually. And then if there is question comes from the students, because there are so many, inputs coming from the lecture, and then I do believe that there are some questions probably coming from the student, especially in terms of the qualitative and then qualitative versus quantitative data, primary and secondary data. And somehow, because, mostly we are in this faculty, tends to apply in doctrinal research rather than applying for the non-doctrinal research. And then, as the Prof. Hanim already explained to us, I think there is possibility to do both equally. It depends on your research problem, actually. So I provide opportunity for all the students to ask that question to Prof. Hanim if you have something that you are unclear and then need to be make it clear, please.
Do you have any problems in terms of writing your proposal?
Yeah.
Anyone? Do you have any problems? They write in English ke bahasa Indonesia, Dr. Maskun?
In Indonesia, they should be right in Indonesia.
I see. Do you have a requirement? Do you have flexibility in terms of language requirement if they wish to write in English? Do you have?
Yes. There is possibility to them to write in English, but mostly the student of
Indonesia.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. It's all right, Dr. Maskun. If let's say I'm pretty open to this. I'm sure they have. Yes, Miss Bahudin Gasma. I have a question. Oh, yes, please. Miss Bahudin Gasma to everyone. I have a question. Yeah, sure.
Pak Misbah, you can directly ask, or you wanna write it down in the
chat. Up to you. It's up to you. You want to write? If you're shy, you can write. Hello, Kairunisa. How are you? You're here again. Tahun berapa ya, Kairun? Nisa tahun akhir ya?
Yes, Prof. I'm currently writing my thesis too.
Nisa. How are you?
Yes,
I'm fine. Ya? Okay, Nisa. Okay, so who wishes to ask me first?
Okay.
Is it
Pak Misbah?
Pak Misbah?
If you wanna ask Pak Misbah, you can ask directly to Prof. Hanim, or if you wanna.
If you wish to write, it's fine as well.
If you wanna use Indonesia, it's okay. I will translate.
It's fine. I try.
Yeah.
I try to understand. Yeah.
Is there a question?
Interesting as you mentioned before about avoiding it. Could you explain? Okay. Could you explain to us the reason? Okay. Now, I'm speaking my personal experience, yeah. Pak Misbah, yeah. I don't have any experience, no background in statistics, because statistics is more, more for the sciences, yeah. But what I'm saying is this: if you're doing something which is purely doctrinal, you're looking at the law itself. I don't think you need statistics. Okay, but if you're doing something which has a lot to do with population, has a lot to do with gender, has a lot to do with, the social community in which you need to get some kind of information from the community, then, and you're working, and you're not working in silo, you're working with other lecturers from other faculties, business school, for example, then perhaps you can translate your question into surveys, yeah, and then your counterpart in your business school will be there to assist you. Because I don't know, I'm talking about my personal experience. I wish I can avoid that, because I'm not good at that. I don't have any knowledge in that. So normally I will leave it to my counterpart in business school. They are the ones who would know how to conduct statistics. I wouldn't know. Mine is very simple, Dr. Maskun. Mine is just, okay, how many percent? Because you can get them from Google Form, yeah? And then you can actually get the conclusion from the Google Form, how many percent, and that's about it. Yeah, very basic, very basic. But if you intend to go through the methods whereby you need to take, the range of water quality, the range of, the air pollution quality index and so forth, I don't have the expertise for that. So in order for you to do your research, you can collaborate with lecturers or academics from other schools that have that kind of knowledge. I'm not saying that we shouldn't, but if you wish to do it, you make sure that you have enough tools, enough knowledge to carry out that bit on statistics. That's what I'm saying. If I can, for me personally, if I can, I'll avoid it, because I'll avoid it. Yeah, but right now I think Dr. Maskun, even when we talk about plastic pollution, yeah, I just went through a survey with one of the NGOs. Yeah, even then there's a very simple kind of survey, and it's just been translated into normal percentages, but nothing like statistics, nothing like that. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Pak Misbah. I hope that answered your question. Khairun, Nisa, silakan.
Thank you so much, Prof. Hanim and Pak Maskun, for inviting us today. So actually, it's kind of a basic question, and I kind of try to get some tips from you. So, Prof. Hanim, I currently writing on my thesis right now. It's about military junta in Myanmar, but I currently writing on my proposal, but unfortunately, sometimes I got confused about how to differentiate between the general explanation and the main explanation of my thesis, because sometimes when I think about the general explanation, I kind of know what is the answer. Like I can refer to any statute or maybe any statute article in a statute, but I confuse whether or not I should explain that on the general explanation or should I include that on the main explanation, because I clearly find this difference between writing a thesis and drafting a memorial, because when we drafting a memorial, it's really clear about what you want to search and what you want to answer. But in thesis, you need to write something in general first, then do the main explanation. So I kind of confused in that, and it's unfortunately affecting me in writings.
Okay.
So I really need your tips. Thank you, Prof.
All right, thank you, Lisa. Thank you for that question. That's a good question. I think at every stage of our writing, yeah, we'll be going through this experience. I have, actually, to be honest, when I say when you read, at the end of it all, you seem to know less. You know what I mean? Because it's just too much information, too much data. At the end, it will cloud your mind. And at the end of the day, you just sit down and say, hey, you know, what have I been reading? Right? So meaning you've read too much. You have read too much. So in other words, when to stop, Lisa? Because at the end of the day, you've got to synthesize all that information, right? And come up with one hypothesis. Now, memorial is different, because memorial, you have given that set of answer, that set of question. You just go into, you already know the question. But doing a dissertation or a project paper or a PhD thesis, you don't know the question yet. This is the problem. You do not know the question. You are actually trying to find out the question, the problem. Memorial is completely different, because the problem is given to you already. Yeah, so that's one step ahead. So what you need to do now is, if I were to ask you, Nisa, you're doing something on military junta in Myanmar, right? So obviously you must have read a lot on military junta in general. What do you mean by military junta? What is the reason for military junta? Where has this conduct been carried out in many parts of the world? Obviously, Myanmar is one of them. Yeah. What are the effects, implications of having a military junta as opposed to other kinds of governments, unitary government, federal government, of, you know, the types of governments in the world? Yeah. What's the effect of this military junta in Myanmar on the population itself, on the law itself? Does it have any impact? I'm just asking, I'm just questioning, I'm just giving you my feedback on your research. Yeah. Now, at the end of the day, you've read everything. What is the problem, really? Lisa, I'm asking you now, what is the problem? So we have military junta in Malaysia. So we have federalism in federal and state in Malaysia. In your country, you have, is it unitary or what? Dr. Maskun, in your, I'm sorry, Indonesia, you have unitary government or?
Tentara
unitary?
Nasional Indonesia, TNI, Tentara Nasional Indonesia.
Is it unitary way of governing?
That's military, yes. Tentara
Unitary,
Nasional
yeah, that's
Indonesia.
unitary, yeah.
Yeah.
So the thing is,
TNI.
so what is the problem having military junta in Myanmar, Nisa? That's the first thing you need to ask. What's the problem? That's the first thing you ask. General, general. The next question is, having a military junta in Myanmar, is the application of the laws less effective? If, let's say, there is no military junta in Myanmar, is it less effective? Is that your question, Lisa?
Actually, Prof, my thesis is about state responsibility for...
Sorry, your status?
for state responsibility. I focusing on what they've been done to the civilians, and then what they will affect the civilians. So I was kind of do some research for whether or not the military junta in Myanmar could be held responsible, and what kind of responsibility that they could give.
The military junta against the civilians, is it?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you talk about that military junta against the civilians, from what perspective? Is it civil or is it criminal acts?
Criminal act.
Because you've got to look into that, right? Because you want to impose some kind of liability responsibility on the military junta. Okay, fine. Yeah, but what have they done to the communities? You know, to the extent that you're saying that they should be liable for something. What have they done? Have they suppressed the civilians? Have they not followed the rule of law in Myanmar? What is it? Have, you know, in terms of freedom of expression, have they suppressed? Is it, you know, what does it mean? You know, and then you have to look at the international standards. Human rights, for example, you have to talk about this again. Yeah, human rights value of human rights. You talk about civil justice. You talk about criminal justice. Basically, you have to understand what is military junta. How does it affect Myanmar? How does it affect the implementation of the governance in Myanmar, right? As opposed to the other types of governments that we have in other countries. Okay, and why you say that military junta is oppressing the civilians in Myanmar? In what aspect? So you have to come up with illustrations, examples, right? Now, because of that, they probably, I do not know, probably they have not adhered to or conform to their constitutional law, their rule of law in Myanmar. I wouldn't know. Probably that is a question that you need to look into. But when you talk about general explanation, you have to look at the background of the governance of military junta in Myanmar. How does it work? In terms of implementation of the laws, you know, who governs them, who implements them, who enforces them, right? Who comes up with the laws in Myanmar, despite the fact that we have military junta? What are their powers? What are their powers? With the ministries, you have to understand all that first, the workings of the government in Myanmar. You have to know that first. Then secondly, if you want to see the effect of military junta governance on the civilians in Myanmar. So basically, you're not even looking at the law itself. You're trying to understand the country.
Yes.
Yeah. You have to understand the country first. If you don't understand the country,
Exactly.
it's difficult for you to understand everything else. It has to come from A to Z. You know, some of us work backwards, yeah? But working backwards means you've got to have enough information from point A in order for you to work backwards. But for most of us, we have to start from A. Okay, Lisa? So don't confuse yourself. I know there's so much data. I have the same problem. Too much data lah, Mas Kun. Too much data. And then finally I say, oh my God, you know, am I going on the right direction? You know, that kind of thing. But you don't worry, Nisa. You know, if you have that's why I said organization is important. You must always start from the country itself. The evolution of military junta. Start from there. And then you move forward. Okay, I hope I've assisted you. This one I need to get an hour with Nisa lah, not a masculine.
It would be really nice, bro. Thank you so much. It's a really
actually
helpful.
whoever who needs my assistance, you know, I know there are two students or three students have actually came up, you know, with their proposal, and I have actually assisted them. So you can do that with me if you want, you know, there's no problem. Okay, Nisa, thank you so much for that question.
Okay, is there any question, students, especially for all of you who already write your proposal, for example, and then you would like to, you know, consultate to the to Prof. Hanim, please, because there are so many things, especially how you write the research problem, for example, and then how to elaborate the research problem in order to find out the good method that you need in order to write it down your proposals. Is there any question again coming from all of you students?
I think Dr. Maskun, if let's say they have any other questions, they can always email me, Dr. Maskun. There's no trouble at all.
Okay,
if they need to seek my help on anything, you just let me know. There is no problem. You know, I just.
Thank you so much, Hanim. Thank you so much. Jadi Bapak Ibu, kalau misalnya ke depannya Bapak Ibu punya pertanyaan bisa email langsung ke Prof Hanim. Emailnya ada di saya. Nanti saya bantu komunikasikan ke Prof Hanim dan kemudian teman-teman bisa meng-email langsung Prof Hanim juga boleh kalau kemudian ada pertanyaan. Okay, if there is no question anymore, I would like on behalf of the faculty, Hanim, I would like to say thank you so much for providing us the great lecture on the research method. Actually, that's one of the most important issue actually, and we really need it.
I just hope, you know, thank you so much again to Dr. Maskun and Prof. Farida and the Faculty of Law, Fakultas Hukum, for inviting me, and hopefully we can do this again in some other forum, in some other time. I look forward to actually meeting all of you face to face, but we do not know, Dr. Maskun, you know, this whole thing is, I don't know, it's driving me crazy, this pandemic COVID-19. You know, we're not sure whether we can leave the country or not. But thank you once again. Thank you very much. Please do not hesitate to write to me. If you have any other questions, just write to me. Okay.
Is there a question? Is there a question coming from Nadia?
One more, Prof. Hanim.
Boleh saja, Nadia.
Sorry.
Silakan, Nadia.
I'm Nadia. Same as Dr. Wandani. I'm also a medical doctor too, pursuing my master's in law.
Right.
And currently writing my proposal about hospital responsibility to overcome COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay.
Especially in Wahidin Hospital in Makassar. But in this globalization era, in this pandemic era, in my field, in medical field, there are so many research conduct. They make so many research. So there are like thousands of new research in my medical fields. Okay. The question is how I'm dealing with it, because I'm afraid if my thesis is done, is it not new anymore? How about the novelty?
Oh, okay. Right. Thank you very much, Nadia. That's a good question. Sometimes we tend to think that it is something everybody has done before. So there is no more surprise anymore, right? But you have to tweak it a little bit in the sense that you have to place it in a unique position. Everybody has done everything on climate change. For example, I'm giving you my thoughts on this. Everyone has done everything on climate change, right? So what is it new for me if I were to write something on climate change? There's always something to write. There's always something to write. The whole idea for you is either you make your topic, narrow it down to a certain province. Now I'm asking you, Nadia, whether or not this research has been done in Makassar. Has it been done in Makassar?
I think not yet.
Yeah. So that is already a novelty in its own way. I mean, everybody can talk about that, you know, the general idea on hospitals' responsibility, but you're doing something which is unique in the sense that you're placing that particular responsibility of hospitals zoning in to Makassar. So probably you're looking at 3-4 hospitals in Makassar, to do your survey, to do your questionnaire, and that will make it very unique. Even though we've been talking about it like, hospital, even in Malaysia. But what unique is, when it comes to yours, you're talking about the Indonesian context only in Makassar.
Yes.
So it is something new because things are different everywhere. You know, in America, we talk about hospital commitments and responsibility. In Malaysia too, okay, we have the general principles, the general rules and ideas, but the implementation may be different in Makassar, maybe different in Bandung, maybe different in Jakarta, maybe different in Medan. So what you're doing now is something that's never been done before, even though the topic is popular, you know, is popular, but you're zoning it into, you know, you're zoning it into, narrowing it down into Makassar. So don't worry about that. I think your thesis is completely okay. There's always something new because, you know, things are different everywhere. It can't be the same. Principles may be the same, but the implementation enforcement may be different because you're looking at people, different individuals. Okay, Nadia. So don't worry. You're good to go. You're good to go.
Yeah.
And all the best to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, is there any question from other students? Oh, Fauzan. Okay.
Okay, check.
Okay, go
We can
Fauzan.
hear you, Pak Fauzan.
Okay, I sincerely apologize for interrupting at this very last minute, Prof.
Not a problem. Not a problem. Happy to
And
help.
for not displaying my video.
That's fine.
I need your advice on how to keep our physical condition in good shape when you know, in this fast-paced environment, especially when it comes to practice, whether lawyering or judging or assessing cases. I also need your advice on how to do a kind of quick skimming for those cases that we need to assess. I think there are two questions. Again, I need to remind you, first and foremost is about our physical condition, how to keep it in good shape, and also how to, are there any tricks or tips from you on how to assess cases quickly? Thank you, Prof.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Okay, the first question. Okay, when you talk about conditioning yourself, throughout your thesis writing, my personal experience, there'll be times when you feel pressured, you feel stressful. This is normal. Yeah, it's a good stress, but don't let it get to you to an extent where you're only thinking about that all the time. It has a lot to do with your peace of mind. So when you talk about physical condition, it has a lot to do with your spiritual condition. For me, at least for me. So when you talk about keeping yourself in shape, you know, do the normal things. You know, do the normal things. Go out for a walk. You know, go and have liburan, holidays. You need to have that. You need to have time to yourself, away from your thesis writing, but not too long lah. Okay. Probably 1 night or 2 nights. Don't make it like 1 year, okay? Don't do that. You know, you have to keep in pace with your with yourself. Yeah, and that's a lot to do. The other part, which I think, apart from the exercising and doing all that, is also trying to connect with your spiritual aspect. And this is where I find praying is the ultimate peace seeker, at least for me. Yeah. Some people meditate, some people salat. Yeah. For the Muslims, we do salat duha, we do salat tahajjud. Yeah. All this works for you, but at the end of the day, do not lose your mind over PhD thesis. Do not lose your mind. That's where you need to organize yourselves. If you don't organize right from the beginning, of course, you're going to have your schedule, you're going to have your Gantt chart, which you obviously need to follow. But at times, because of personal matters, because of other things, external factors, you know, things may run a little bit away from your schedule. That's okay. That's normal. That's life. But remember, at the end of it all, you've got to be committed to it. yeah, and at the end of the day, you wish, you visualize yourself by having this image in your mind that you want to collect that scroll of paper during your convocation. But keeping, I have no secrets to keeping myself in shape. What I normally do now, Dr. Maskun, is I go on YouTube. Yeah, even now, yeah, I go on YouTube and I follow this exercise, yeah, walk at home, yeah, from this American trainer. So I'm trying to keep myself in shape, right, Dr. Maskun. The next time I see you, you see myself all slim, slim, trying to be all slim. Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, but I hope, Pak Fauzan, when you say physical, it's not just a physical state, it's also your mental state and also your spiritual state. So it's difficult to balance it, but you've got to find ways and means to balance it up, and sometimes you just go away, just don't look at your PhD thesis for a while, and just go and have a little bit of a time out with your families and friends. Yeah, okay, that's number one. Number two, when it comes to tricks and tips and strategies on how to read your cases, how to look into it pretty quickly, yeah, without taking too much time. There are ways and means. This one, I can't, actually there's a way of looking at it. I do not know how. Probably you've given the lecture or advice from your supervisors on how to read cases, yeah? But what I do is normally this. First and foremost, you need to find out what is it that you're looking for. What is the question that you're looking for? Second is, what is the area of law that you're looking at? It could be contract, it could be criminal, it could be, constitutional law, it could be human rights law, international law, it could be any one of those. But first and foremost, you need to find out what is the question that you're seeking for. That's the basic thing. Once you have zoned down on those two, narrowed down on those two issues, what is the problem question that you're looking for, the answer you're looking answer for? The second one is you're looking at the subject area. Once you have, now you have, I don't know what kind of system you use over there, Pak Maskun, yeah, Dr. Maskun, but we have LexisNexis over here in Malaysia because we follow the common law system, yeah, and all those legislations and cases and whatnot, they're all stored in that website. And we have to subscribe to it. And obviously university subscribes to that and we go to that machine, yeah? So what we do is normally you go into that system and then you type out basically the what do you call, the trigger words pertaining to your question. For example, Nadia, you're looking at responsibilities of liabilities of hospitals, right? So you're looking probably in terms of liability, responsibility, damages, yeah, harm and suffering, loss or damages done to patients, for example. Probably you can do that. And if you have an idea of which subject area that you're looking at, probably under tort, probably under contract, probably under criminal law, probably under constitutional law or human rights law. And then you key it in. Once you've received those cases, look at the head notes. I mean, we have the head notes, right? It's a brief summary of what the case is all about. Read. See whether or not it is suitable for it fits the description of your problem. If it does not, move aside first, right? So probably you get like 20, 30 cases. So you've got to go through each and every one of them. Go through the head notes first. See whether or not that particular case is suited to the problems that you're seeking an answer for. And then probably you have to arrange them in that order. The most relevant and the least relevant. When I say the least relevant means, sometimes it may not be connected to the problem question that you're looking for. Probably it has something in the judgment which kind of directs you to the answer to your question. How you read it is depending on you. Okay, it depends on each individual. Some individuals, some students that I know, they just read head notes. Facts of the case, head notes, conclusion, summary, that's it. Right? So they are not reading the cases in depth, meaning you're not looking as to why the decision was made. Why did the judge say this? Did the judge say this linking this to another area of law, to another case law, to another example? What is it? So basically what I'm saying is this: arrange the relevancy of the cases to the question that you have in mind. Number one, write down to the least relevant. It's the first thing you need to do, okay? Beside the other 2 points that I've pointed out just now. And then you read through it, read the head notes, and then skim through the answer. But you've got to do it very quickly lah, because you're looking, right? Because when the judges come up with the decisions, the judges can be all over. Some judges can be all over, some judges can be very organized, depending. But you got to read, you have no choice. But only read, skim through it very quickly and identify the portion which is the most relevant to your question. Okay, obviously the head notes will assist you to identify whether or not that case is relevant. But when you're reading the cases, look through it, yeah, and look through it very quickly because you don't have time. There are 30 cases, and look at the portion that is most relevant. But that's a skill, Fauzan. That is a skill. Yeah, it is not like, you know, today you're a law student and today you're able to do this. No, no, no. You know, a law student will have trouble. Within the first year of their studies, they will have trouble. Okay, because it's something new. It's a skill that you need to develop over time. Okay, I hope that assists you a little bit, Pak Fauzan.
Sure, Prof. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
All the best, Fauzan. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you,
the
Pak
best.
Maskun. Thank you, Fakultas.
Thank you, Prof. Azlan. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question.
Is
I
there
hope we can
anyone-
exercise together, yeah, Pak
Yeah.
Fauzan? We'll schedule in together.
Thank you, Prof.
Okay, take care. Thank you.
One question, because we will have 10 minutes more before ending this class until 11:30. Is there any question? Okay. Okay, if there is no any question anymore, seperti yang sudah disampaikan Prof. Hanim, you can send email to Prof. Hanim directly, and then her email ada di saya. Nanti saya bagi kepada teman-teman semua yang memang membutuhkan informasi lanjutan ataupun kemudian jika ada hal yang hendak dikonsultasikan khususnya berhubungan dengan materi kita hari ini tentang metode penelitian. Ya. Because in my understanding, actually, when we talk about the research method, it's something that's universal. So even we are Indonesia, Prof. Hanim in Malaysia, and other countries actually is the same as like when talking about the doctrinal, non-doctrinal is really the same as. And then saya hendak menggarisbawahi beberapa hal. Yang pertama adalah you have to open your minds. So open-minded when you write your proposal in all degrees. As Prof. Hanim say, read, and read. That's the key for the doctrinal research. And then one, it is the interdisciplinary research for the social, legal, or non-doctrinal research. So I think hal yang paling terpenting, the most important things yang teman-teman harus lakukan adalah berlatih, dan belajar. I think that's good. My last statement actually, and then on behalf of the faculty of Prof. Hanim, again, I would like to say thank you so much. And then you know, and all the students also would like to say thank you so much for providing us the great lecture today and improving our knowledge and then skill in terms of the research method. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Maskun.
And then see you in 1 or 2 because we still have 2 things that we have to do it. The seminar, global seminar for students.
Yes.
Conference, right? So
that's right. 11 December, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
11 December, yes. And then one more thing. Yeah, that's the other one is we need to discuss about the MOA on mobility.
Yeah.
Yeah. But those are the questions I forwarded to you, and I think I must come from you, Dr. Maskun, you know, from Prof. Rida, right?
Okay. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you.
Ya,
okay.
Terima kasih banyak.
Terima kasih banyak. Sama kita. Kembali.
Ya.
Ya, thank you.
Oke. Dan kepada teman-teman